Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. And you guys know my custom is to welcome our guests. And I know that they're coming with a couple of things I deem very, very expensive. That is their time. 24 hours has been given to every single man and woman on this planet. How we respect and honor time will tell me much about you and your life, because it is plain view for us all to see. The other is the journey. The journey is a powerful created. It's created the individual that is before us, and we want to stop and welcome Ed for coming to Threads of Enlightenment and imparting to you and I wisdom, knowledge, and insight so that we can become better human spirits while we occupy this beautiful place called Earth. Ed, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, man.
Thanks, Ken. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. One of the things that I asked of questions on the onset of the conversation is, how do you serve mankind? And the purpose is twofold, because I want the audience to understand that this time on the planet is not all about themselves, but it is also about the interdependentness of one another. How do you serve mankind?
Absolutely. So, throughout my life, business-wise and personal-wise, I always saw those two things as being fragmented, right? Being two separate things. And, I have, before I would have a spirituality side, and then I would have the business side, right? Okay, now I'm putting on my business hat, and now I'm going to do business. But when I stop doing business, then I'm going to be a family man. I'm going to be involved in my church or ministry, and those are separate things. But, now, later on in life, right, I look at it as I'm one person. I'm a whole person. And so for me, I serve mankind both through my business and through what I do. And I also serve through a ministry that I'm involved in locally here in Maryland that helps men and women recover from, it could be from abuse, trauma, divorce, bankruptcy, homelessness, drug addiction, alcoholism. I'm part of a ministry called Agape House, and we're actually launching a church on June 2nd called Recovery Church. We've always had a church, but now we're part of a national movement called Recovery Church that started in Florida. And I'm a leader in a ministry for men, basically, that whether they're coming from psychiatric facility, whether they're coming from rehab, whether they're coming from, on the street, homelessness. We help men that way. And then in my business, I coach real estate agents, basically how to generate leads and grow their business. So I do that on the business realm. And then I also coach realtors in the specific niche that I've been kind of pigeonholed into through adversity. Basically, I was pigeonholed into a certain niche of real estate, and that's working for banks and servicers, helping them evaluate and sell their homes. So those are the two ways that I mainly serve my fellow man.
That is awesome, man. I'm so excited about unpacking most of that. And as Ed said, we are the whole package, the spiritual part, the business part, the family part, all of it. We are programmed to believe that they are all separate, and most of us live our life that way, and that is why one's life is fragmented, because we are thinking fragmented. And you can behave a certain way in church and behave differently at business, not understanding that it is the whole package. You need to be honorable in church. You need to be honorable with your family. You need to be honorable in business. It is one and the same. And when you are not functioning correctly in one or the other, you are not functioning correctly. People need to understand that we are programmed as it's separate, but it is not. And the journey is to put all those pieces back together. So one of the first spaces that we visit, Ed, as we are embarking on our journey on this planet after we come from the hospital, we are brought into this unit that is called a family. Mom and dad, they see the world through whatever prism and programming they have. And they are now going to impart into your life some data. And I always tell people, mom and dad is strangers. Your brothers and sisters are strangers. You don't know them, but you're in this group. It's known as a family, and your life begins here. What was your family unit like?
Yeah, so growing up, I grew up in Laurel, Maryland, which I was born in Baltimore, but I was raised in Laurel, Maryland, which is right in between Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. My father worked for the space program. He worked for NASA 15 years, and then he worked for Naval Research Lab for 20 years. My childhood was very, very rough in terms of my mother was an alcoholic and had some drug issues as well. I would say my dad was a good provider, but he was kind of emotionally detached because of the turmoil with my mother, and there was a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing, that type of thing. And so when I was about, I would say from when I was born, so I was named after my grandfather. My grandfather passed away about 3 months before I was born, and I was named after my grandfather on my dad's side. And I would say they were not fit to be together from the moment I was born. So there were problems before I was born, and then when I was born, and then they finally did get a divorce when I was 8 years old. And it was a very messy divorce. It was a very hard divorce. And, so that trauma kind of shaped me in a way.
Yeah.
I would say my, and I won't get too much into the details of, what happened in terms of the divorce and all, but that really kind of formed and shaped my personality. And one of the things, it's funny because one of the things that they mainly fought about was money.
Yeah.
My mother kind of always, we had a nice life. I mean, we lived, in the suburbs, of Washington, D.C. and we really didn't want for much. But it was always, my mom always wanted more and more.
Yeah.
That shaped me, and I would say my drive later on in life to, when you talk to business people, it's like when I was 20, wanted to be a millionaire by the time I was 25. And then when I was 25, I wanted to be a millionaire by the time I was 30. Just that drive. But that really shaped me, early on. And, alcohol and drug dependency is part of my story. I'm going to have 12 years sober, in January.
Man.
Yeah. And it wasn't my first try or first shot at being sober. I had stints, like 3 stints of 2.5 years, and then I would relapse. But I've been on this recovery journey for 18, 19 years, 20 years of getting and being sober, which has been hard, but it's been one of the greatest, journeys of my life, through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and really changing myself from the inside out, like you talk about.
Yeah, that's the key. The change can only be done from the inside out. There's no other way to change. It comes from there. The decision to change comes from that part of yourself, because the individual inside of you is seeing the destruction of you. And, at some point, you guys are going to have to come and have a conversation based on whatever trauma shows up. You guys are going to have a conversation that says, okay, enough. Let's do this.
And you mentioned before in the opening about programming, and that's so true.
Yeah.
So true. We have this, I just mentioned my childhood programming, right?
Yeah.
But if we don't, like you said, if we don't change, if we don't work on ourselves, on our inner man, we're bound to repeat the same patterns and the same mistakes as before. And, you keep repeating the patterns until you learn the lesson, right?
Yeah. And I think I always tell people that there's always one within the family unit that gets an opportunity to create a different path for the family, for the lineage, if you will. Because when you look back into alcoholism and several other types of bondages, if you will, where it's captured in a family, it's passed down from one generation, several generations. So it's an ancestral thing. And one is afforded the opportunity to change the dynamic. And Ed mentioned that he would go on off and he came on. That's the journey, man. The journey is not something that is linear, that is perfect. And if you're not perfect, you're going to give up. It is just being, I tell people the word discipleship means that one is disciplined. And the discipline comes in the fact that you made a decision somehow, some way, I'm going to get out of this. And what happens, you become disciplined in getting it. It takes years, but it will be accomplished. And so keep your discipline, guys. And that's what I said, you have to learn how to honor yourself, respect yourself. You have to respect your words. So here you are, Ed. You grew up in this family where you were surrounded by trauma. And you said that one of the first major trauma that stepped into this young man's life was the divorce of the family. And you saw how it affected all of the people in there. While you were in that space as a young child, 8 years, what were some of those thoughts? Because I know my sons came out of divorce, and I would talk with them to get some insights into them while they were going through it. What was this young man thinking about himself? Not mom and dad. What was he thinking about himself around all that tornado of emotions going on within that family?
I would say there was a lot of shame and guilt.
Yeah.
And am I the cause of this type thing?
Yeah.
And I just remember, being a little boy, and I would almost like construct my own world in my own room, because the outer world was so chaotic that I would fantasize and I would create my own world that could be like a safe, comforting place, whether it's in my room with stuffed animals or whatever I would be doing. You know what I mean? That's what I remember, that it was so chaotic that I couldn't trust, or so there was fear, there was guilt, there was shame, and I wouldn't trust the outside world to be safe. I didn't feel safe. I would say that was the biggest thing.
Those feelings of not safe and didn't trust the outside world, how did that translate to your relationship with your friends or people in school and stuff like that? How did that translate?
I mean, in school, I was like the class clown. I was always getting in trouble. I was acting out, for attention, that type of thing. Didn't do very well in school. Was never a big fan of school. Whenever anybody tells me, this is what you have to do, I'm like, no, I'm doing the exact opposite, right? Yeah. So, but what happened? I went through this divorce. I went through this divorce situation as a child. But then my older brother, I'm the youngest of two older brothers. One of my older brothers, he moved to California to be in a band. He was a musician, bass player. And then my other brother was my second oldest brother. He got involved with gymnastics, and I was like, and so I was like, oh wow, I was like, I'll do that. I'll be like my other brother. And I was actually in that from age 9 or 10 till I was about 15 or 16, and competed, first when I was younger, right, just on the state level, but then went regional and national. And my brother Charlie, he got a scholarship to University of Illinois. He was on the junior national team. And when I was a sophomore in high school, I actually had 2 or 3 colleges say, all you have to do is finish high school and you've got a full scholarship. I excelled. I did really well. I won 3 state championships in 3 different age divisions, and I kind of put my whole mind and soul and heart into that. Like if I can do this, I get out of this situation, right? And I become a national, I get on the national team, maybe go to the Olympics, whatever. And this is my ticket, right? Unfortunately, when I was 15, I injured myself really bad, and I was no longer able to compete at all. I was no longer able to do all 6 events, and that was probably the second traumatic thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
And so then I kind of switched, and I said, well, my other brother's a musician, and by this time he had come back from California. I was like, well, my other brother is a musician. I'll be a musician. So then I changed my persona again.
Yeah.
But then with the music stuff, right, came all of the drugs, the rock and roll, right? The rock and roll life. So anyway, I know I kind of went on a ramble there, but but that's what kind of, so then when I got involved in music, I was going to make it big in music, I'm going to, kind of, and I did well in that too. It seems like whatever, like from the alcoholic addict, like when we focus in on something and want to do it, we tend to excel. We tend to do pretty well, but it also comes at a cost at everything else sometimes. But so that's really, I'll leave it off there for now. But my journey is from there. But that was really what caused I don't know if it caused the alcohol and drug dependency, but it certainly didn't help.
So being in that scene, in the music scene, is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's the anthem.
Right.
Come on. So when you're getting into that space, that's pretty much the foundation by which you operate and you move. Because I was in a band too, and I was playing, bass players. I understand all the principles of music, if you will. So here you are, this young kid getting into just being a musician and the lifestyle of a musician, and found himself captured, if you will, by the same energy and the same lifestyle that mom was in. When you recognized that you were there, Ed, how did it land in you? Because now you're going to recognize, hey, what the heck, How did you receive that knowledge of like, hey, I'm here?
Yeah, it's so crazy because you just mentioned that I became basically in bondage or trapped in the same thing that my mom was trapped in, right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that until way, way later. I mean, in fact, some of the patterns of my life, right? I've been married and divorced twice. I have 3 children, and I could say my marriages were exact blueprints of the dynamic between my mom and dad, almost to the T. But I didn't realize that because I was talking to a friend last night on the phone, and I said, like right now, I've been single for 6 years. I mean, that's like the longest that I've ever been single ever in my life, because it would always be one girlfriend, then maybe a month, 2 months, and then another girlfriend from the age of, just as long as I can remember, from the age of like 13 and on. I've always been in a codependent relationship. And now it's like, I haven't been in a relationship for about 5 to 6 years. And it's like, it's the first time in my life where I actually feel like comfortable with myself and love myself. And to have a relationship would be nice, but I don't, it's something that I desire. Sure. I desire to, to marry again, but it's not something I need. And that's one of the things that I had before, where I would go through a breakup, then it would be about 1 to 3 months, and I had such a void inside of myself that I had to get into another relationship. Whether I felt 100% about that relationship or not, I was getting into it,
Yeah, I had a friend of mine, man, that she couldn't be out of a relationship, and so she would break up with one, she'd go back to her ex. And so I would call her the X factor. I said, you need, pull yourself away from that type of pattern. And started looking at, why are you going back to the X factor, number one, and why are you feel like you need to be in something? That's a hard place for people to be.
Yeah,
it's a hard place for people to inspect, because when you are there, and you have to inspect and be honest with yourself and recognize that. And once you begin to do that, I remember when I came out of my divorce, I didn't date anyone. I dated everyone and anyone for a while. And then I said, no, I needed to be separate from all of that. And I separated myself, a
Hmm.
sabbatical for, I think it was like a year or so. And I took that time to get to know me,
Hmm.
and asked a lot of questions and began to get answers and work and started falling in love with myself and different things like that. You guys are listening to us, man. I encourage any of you that are find yourself circular, having relationships in and out and need to be, just slow down for a minute. Get
Hmm.
into a relationship with yourself and you'll come out a better person as a result of it. So trust me on that.
Absolutely.
So here you are, Ed. You are, as you said, you're doing the tenets of rock and roll, and you found yourself in there. And as you're moving through life now, what started to happen to you? So how did you manage, number one, while you're in that scene? Because I know what happened to me in there for a while. I had to leave to come back in because, but how did you manage yourself in there, being this young man that is now following the footsteps of his mom and recognizing it? But how were you dealing with you in that situation? What was your conversation with yourself?
I think at that time, my conversation with myself was, again, it was more of some external moment is going to make this all right.
Yeah,
So if we get a record deal, if we make it big, if we get signed, then that is going to make this all stop, and I'll be okay.
yeah,
I'll have money, I'll have success, whatever. It's always that. If I get to this point, then I will I will be okay, and it's always an external. So we were talking about relationships. So if I get with this girl, if I get with this woman, then it's going to be okay. If my business succeeds to this level, then I'm going to be okay. And the whole time, I think that, in my case, my higher power of God was saying, no, if you get with me, then you'll
yeah,
be okay. Then I can make you okay from the inside out.
yeah,
But I had beliefs of God. I had belief in God, belief in a higher power, but I didn't see it as like a relationship. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
You weren't there yet. Everyone is just on the outskirts, believe in something. There's a God, but you hadn't touched base. You hadn't had that foundation. You haven't had that encounter to create that relationship. So here you are. You're moving through life. When you mentioned the marriages and that you divorced from those, when did you get into real estate, Ed? What was it that pulled you towards real estate, and why did you go there?
Well, it's the same. It's the same thing that pulled me towards gymnastics, pulled me towards music. It was making it big, making a lot of money,
Yeah,
becoming wealthy. I was working at a job at a time with a tech firm. It was a telecom company called Sienna Corporation. I don't know if you remember them.
yeah,
They're still around. It was back in 1998, 99, 2000, 2001. I was working for them. My dad pushed me to finish high school, and then I wanted to be a rock star, right? But I needed some sort of a trade to do something,
yeah,
and my dad always pushed me to that. So I graduated from a trade school with a certificate in electronics, and I worked for several places, but I ended up at Sienna Corporation. I was a technician, a lab technician for fiber optic amplifiers for
yeah,
telecom systems, and I was working there just outside of Baltimore. I bought my first house. I just had my oldest son, my first son, and I was laid off. But
yeah,
meanwhile, I was interested in this real estate thing, mainly from late night TV. No money down, Carlton
yeah,
Sheets, that whole thing.
yeah,
So I had bought his course. I read it. Listen. I think there were CDs at the time. Listened to the CDs and started dabbling in that. But then I basically lost my job. From the tech bubble bursting, and lost everything. My first wife, I met her at my job, and she still had a job, but I did not. And I had started working with a mentor in the Baltimore area. His name is Steve Cook, mainly on the investing side. And my first wife, she was very supportive. She said, if you really like this real estate thing, I started looking for other jobs, but she was like, if you really like this real estate thing, you should give it a shot. So
Yeah.
I went a full steam ahead into real estate. And I've been in it ever since. And like I said, it's been ups and downs. And I started as a real estate investor, mainly finding properties for other bigger real estate investors where I'd make a little bit of money, but they would rehab and sell the property or rehab and be a landlord. And I did that and then I got into the fix and flips. And then 2008 happened, right?
I remember 2008. I was working for Pulte Homes. I was a project manager for Pulte Homes. And I remember 2008. I just bought my home because I was making a lot of money. And when we saw it coming, I remember the conversation was no one thought it was going to be that long. We actually thought it was going to be, maybe 6 months or something like that or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when that thing came in, I saw some horrific stories. I'm sure you have them too. People lost everything. I remember people walking away and leaving homes empty, just bought homes and couldn't handle it, couldn't afford. I mean, it was wild. I know a lot of people lost business.
I think either the chairman of Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae committed suicide. People were jumping out of buildings in New York.
Yep.
And so I had 12 projects going on at the time, and 12 projects that, I had like 3 or 4 on the market, 3 or 4 that were almost ready to list, 3 or 4 that were just getting started, and they all had depreciated by 30%. And I was like, okay, well, this isn't going to work. So I did a lot of deeds in lieu of foreclosure on those properties. Some of them were foreclosed on. Some of them I sold barely. And then I had all these lines of credit from, so easily and having the, to start projects and finish projects and just to overrun, and ended up declaring bankruptcy. But the meantime, I was doing what's called BPOs, which are broker price opinions for banks and servicers. And I was doing those along the way with the investing because they provided cash flow. I got licensed as a realtor in 2002, basically just so I could have access to the MLS. And then I got into those BPO things, and then everything fell apart. And I was like, I had banks along the way saying, hey, will you sell our foreclosure properties? I was like, I don't do that. I'm just an investor. I do BPOs, but I'm not doing those. But then 2008, I was like, I'll take them. And I started selling REOs. I started selling foreclosures, and kind of got known for that in that space. And I've sold, over 600 homes, as a listing agent for different banks, Bank of America, SunTrust, Chase. Pretty much have worked for every major bank, every major servicer that's out there, except for a few. But like I told you earlier in the conversation, I was pigeonholed into that. I didn't set out when I started real estate and say, I want to be an REO agent, but it was kind of the way I look at it. It was God's grace and mercy that moved me into,
it was a niche.
Into my niche.
They needed someone to do it.
And
it's
it's
perfect.
I get all the time to do a rehab project or do an investing, and I'll sell properties to investors, but it's just
stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. When God put you in the lane, you stay in the lane, bro.
I got burnt so bad back then that it's almost like PTSD, right? I never want to stand in a bankruptcy court again, ever.
I remember there was time it was interesting. A lot of friends lost everything. I mean, developers lost everything. It was an interesting time. So here you are. You went through probably one of the darkest period in your life, and yet within that dark period, God moved you into an arena whereby you are able to manage and make some money.
Yeah.
You had said around that time, how did you begin to, because that's a dark time, all of us, I remember that. How were you able to manage, Ed? How did you talk to yourself? How were you helping you come out of the dark times, as the disappointed, the broken dreams, all of those things that was going on? What was happening to you as an individual within that mix?
Yeah, sure. So, at the time, so I mentioned I had my first son in
Son, yeah.
2001, and then I had a daughter and around that same time where everything fell apart. She had just been born, and so my drive really was, I got to provide for this family.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing on my mind, was the drive was, I have to provide for my family and I have to do what I have to do. In terms of being a foreclosure agent or working for a bank and selling REO properties, it's not glamorous. You know what I mean? You're coming to somebody's house and you're saying, you no longer own the home and, you need to move. But, I've found through that too, that I can also be a help to the people that are in the house. So I've had a lot of situations where, I've helped, families who've moved into another place and, get them $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 for their family to relocate versus a sheriff showing up and evicting them and it being a horrible situation like that. So, but it was, the drive was really, I have to do this, and I think sometimes in life, God allows for situations to put that in us where we have to get up and we have to move forward. Sometimes we can be stuck in life and then a traumatic event will happen and that will push us and propel us forward. Yeah. And that happened to me actually. Another situation happened in 2017 where I was kind of in a stuck place and something happened, something traumatic happened and it forced me to move forward.
And at what point in your life that God came in and you began to have this more personal relationship with Him? What caused you to seek God and began that relationship? What was happening in your life at that time?
Yeah, it was trauma. 2017 went through a really difficult breakup and the end of my second marriage and estrangement from my kids. So, and then 2020, actually what I talked about before was another traumatic event that propelled me forward into what I'm doing now in terms of serving in the ministry that I serve in, but also serve in my business as well. But 2017, I would say, I really 2018 was a year where I made a decision to recommit myself to God and really get serious about changing.
Yeah.
You mentioned change before. That 2018 was when I really started going on that path.
Yeah, my mom used to say this, and it used to annoy me, but the wisdom in this saying as I got older, I remember, she said, change is not change until you're just leave me alone, But, as I got older, I saw the wisdom in that, like I said, we talk about changing, I'll change. But my mom would say to me, change is not change until you change. And so I had to learn that someone had to help me with that. And I realized it was God. I also realized that my soul, the inner man who I am, is capable of making some decisions that will propel me in, and once I've decided. And I always point to, because I grew up in the church, and I point to people about this scripture, this woman with the issue of blood. She was sick, rich woman, spending our money and believe in the healthcare system at the time. And she spent all her money and she was getting sick, worse and dying. And she heard about this guy, Jesus healing. And the scripture said, she said within herself, if I can touch him. So that tells me it wasn't her conscious mind that said within herself. Somebody else said something. And she said within herself that if I touch the hem of his garment, I'm going to get what I want. And so subconscious mind or the soul of the individuals in that woman made that decision. And when she made that decision, she took the steps necessary to accomplish what she had said that she wanted to do. She didn't want to talk to Jesus. She wasn't interested. She didn't want to touch the disciples. She didn't want to talk to nobody. She just wanted to touch the hem of his garment. And the fact that she touched the hem, she didn't pull it, she didn't tug it, she didn't do none of that stuff. She simply touched it, and he yells, "Who touched me?" And so I tell people, when you make that decision inwardly and you start that piece, you're actually touching God when you begin that process, because he will work with you to get what you want. Because he turned around and he said to her, "Woman, your faith made you whole. Not my faith, not my disciples, not nobody else. Your faith." So there's a degree where we have to be able to take responsibility to now begin to do the corresponding actions to get what we want. So here you are, you're reconnected to God. And I know being reconnected to God, he's going to start showing you things about you. What were some of those things? Because you have to deal with alcoholism, you have to deal with all those things. What were some of those things that you had to underline, hidden things that you discovered that was implanted in this young child from the divorce and from the lifestyle with mom and dad and the fear and all the different things that I'm sure God will bring to light so that you can begin to deal with it? What were some of those things that you discovered?
I would say it was, shame, fear, remorse, selfishness. Yes. Selfishness. I look back early on in my career and early on in my kids' lives and in my two divorces. The biggest thing was, what was the main problem with me? I'm not talking about them. I'm not talking about her. I'm talking about what was because that's the only factor that I can control. What was wrong with me? I would say it was selfishness and self-centeredness. That was the root. That was the root of my problem. And that was, from, missing time, not spending time with my wives, not spending time with my kids, because I was so driven on this success path, this business path. And you can't get that time back. You know what I mean?
No.
You can spend the time now and be present in the moment now, but you can't go back and repair those marriages. You can't go back and but I would say that that's the biggest thing that God revealed to me was my selfishness and the what would just ask me the question, why? We were talking about relationships earlier, and why do you want one so bad? Why do you want a woman so bad? Why do you want business success so bad? Think why. Why do you? And why do you need them? And so often we're just driven by our subconscious, and we're just driven, and we don't actually stop and ask the question why. And when you come to the end of yourself and you realize, I don't need these things, all I need is him. Then you get to that point of contentment, like Paul says in the scriptures, I've learned to be content in all things, whether I'm up at the top of the mountain or I'm down in the valley. I've learned to be content, and that took a really long time. For me to get to that point.
It took me a long time too. That's very same lesson about contentment, because I was always driven to achieve the financial piece. And then when I saw, and I've thought about this, I call it the better gospel, because most of the teachers out there, the prosperity teachers, are missing it, because those are the things that we were chasing, the prosperity piece. and realized that no, there's a better gospel, that gospel of contentment, where we are able to be content in the highs and the lows and still be focused and on God. Yeah. So as God began to show you, Ed, and began to bring these compartments, these different compartments of you together, your business, your spiritual, all of those things, as I said, the fact that we were programmed that we needed to have them separate. But as you started learning about bringing them together, what changes began to happen in your life personally and then within your business? And we know that your life is an extension of your ministry and stuff like that. But how did it start affecting your business life?
I would say at first there was a lot of confusion. So I was trying a lot of different things out and seeing, is it this? Is it this God? Is it that? Is it this? And trying different things out. And then, kind of when you're doing that and you're in the testing phase, you can tell when God is just closing a door, right? You can tell when God is just like, or it's really difficult or it's not. Some things are difficult or worth it to be difficult, but when God touches something, it's usually pretty clear. And I would say with the main endeavors that I'm involved in now, God has just been blessing it. It's just been easy. When I focus on it and I do it, it grows and people are being blessed on the other side. I'm being blessed and it's just an easy, it's just like they say, smooth sailing, right? It's just smooth. When I tried to do some other things, and some of those were, like the real estate investing path where I find properties for other investors again, it was just not easy at all. It was, God completely slammed the door on it. But with what I've been working on now, it's been growing really fast, and people are really excited about it. I'm really excited about it, and I can see God's hand on it.
Yeah, man. Like I said, when He puts you in a space, and he put you there for a reason. Stepping outside of it is going to cost you your life, as they say. I remember Saul was crowned a king, and the prophet was a little late, and so the people are harassing him, hey, and he went and tried to perform as a prophet, and the prophet showed up and said, "What are you doing, bro?" And as a result of him doing that, he lost his kingship. It was stripped from him and was given to David. And so sometimes I tell people we've got to learn to stay within our lane, because God picked that for us, and when we step outside of it, we can lose much, if you will. So whoever's listening to this conversation and you're listening, you're listening because God is talking to you. Stay in your lane, man. As you are beginning to recognize that God, when you step outside, He just spanks you on the hand and it doesn't work out. And you're here now seeing the spiritual side of you blossoming as well, because on the onset, Ed, you talked about all the different types of condition that someone can be in, and your team is able to assist them. It doesn't matter what type of condition it is, homelessness, drug abuse, it didn't matter. So talk to us a little about that. Invite us to some of those beautiful times, if you will, in helping some family, some individual through one of those dark times, and switching their location, if you will, by switching their perspective of where they're at and who they are. And once you switch that location of their perspective and move it to another, there's a degree of freedom that individual and their family would experience. Invite us to one of those.
Yeah, so what comes to mind is a guy who used to be my old roommate in this ministry. His name is Taylor, and he was a guitar player for a worship band at church. And he was my roommate, and he used to sleep under a bridge in Baltimore with a butcher knife in his sleeping bag, because people would come and assault him at night and take his things, and he was a heroin addict and came into our ministry, and he began playing guitar on our worship band, and he got clean, got sober, and he was actually in a rehab called MRP, and he was kicked out of the rehab in 72 hours before he came to us. And he ended up going back to that rehab, sober, working for that rehab, and then working for one of the largest rehabs on the East Coast now, and
Wow.
is now married and just bought a house, all within the time that I've been involved with the ministry. So like
Wow.
6 years, all that
Wow.
took place.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah, and then there's another gentleman. His name is a Jewish gentleman named Bob, who is a senior citizen, drank his whole life, like from the age of 30 until he was 62. Didn't draw a sober breath, and came into our ministry. He relapsed several times, but God told told us not to give up on him, and is now sober. He's actually a psychologist, a therapist. He got his license to. We call him Dr. Bob. He got his license to practice back again. Got a small practice with another firm, and he also he no longer lives in the ministry, but he's close by, and I see him at 12-step meetings.
Yeah.
But he's been sober. He's been sober over 6 years as well. So I mean, there's a lot of stories, and for us, we're the type of organizations where we offer a lot of grace to people. Some places, if you relapse, they'll throw all your stuff out, on the street and say you're on your own. We take it on a case-by-case basis, and we look at everybody as an individual. So it's a good thing.
Hey guys, anyone that has been listening to us, to our conversation, we're going to put everything together for you guys, all of his links and information so you can get access to him. And those of you that are even outside of his state, get in touch with him. I'm sure he knows of resources. The heart of the ministers is to help individuals. And so if you are in a space where you need help, give them a call. We're going to provide links for you to get to them, man, because help is, all of us need help from time to time.
Absolutely.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't let pride come in. Humble yourself and go and ask. And, people are there to hold you and walk with you. Ed, man, I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment and sharing your life's journey and your ministry and your business. And those of you guys who are interested in the real estate piece, we're going to put all of that so that you can have access to him and he can be able to help you through.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ken. I appreciate it.
Man, it's an honor, man.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.